I paused in the front office and said to Rhonda, "I hope you spit in his coffee." So there I was, perusing the internet, looking for a Silver Age Lois Lane action figure for reasons, when suddenly I stumbled upon a Lois Lane YA novel series. Yes, series. Something that I'd never heard of, with the first book released in 2015. Naturally, I was intrigued, and then I saw it was only $10. What a savings. So I picked it up. I read it, and then oh boy, did I find that I had things to talk about. And also, I did not buy Post-its. I could have. You know the little stickies with the color codes? That would have been helpful. Now I know that there are some who are quite fond of this book, and while there are elements to like, overall I found it flawed. So if you're not looking to have this book analyzed, this may not be the video for you. If you are, get ready to discuss Lois Lane fallout. There is not fallout for Lois, unless the fallout is she gets everything she wants and friends. Positive fallout. The cover is pretty fun. It looks like she's a spy of some kind. One of the commenters said it looked like she was Red Tornado. Now the idea of a book series starring a young Lois Lane flexing her investigative muscles, learning to love being a journalist, and encountering some kind of not supernatural but superhero elements, Nancy Drew style, could be fun. But it all comes down to the execution. Firstly, some backstory. How did this book come about and what was its goal? Because there is one. I'm Sasha. This is Casually Comics, and today we're in the realm of tie-ins and talking about one of my favorite things, Lois Lane. I love Lois Lane. I'm gonna have to read the other two. It was inevitable. Lois Lane debuted all the way back in Action Comics #1 in 1938 alongside the Man of Steel. She's in ways just as integral to the Superman mythos as the man himself, as she provides a human element, counterpoint, and yes, love interest. But anyone who ventured into the comics would know that she is far, far more than that, and has been for quite some time. That is just one element of her character. And even if it is there, it does not detract or make her less than. Even the zaniest Silver Age Lois outings could have some gems in there. Her solo series may have been called Superman's Girlfriend Lois Lane, but Lois could hold her own. As tied as she was to Superman, she was also her own character, and people have been making attempts to break her out of any kind of stereotypical mold since the 40s. There had been very early pushes to have her occupy a more equal position to Clark. In 1965, her comic, Superman's Girlfriend Lois Lane, was the third highest selling comic on the newsstands in the nation, just behind Superman and Superboy. However, there are still some who, when they looked at Lois's history, focused on the Lois Lane Superman's girlfriend aspect, and the idea that she had not been highlighted enough, that she could stand out more. Which, yes, Lois Lane could hold her own series that wasn't necessarily only about getting married, as hilarious as those stories are. And that was the idea, the buzz around when this book was announced, with headlines such as, "Lois Lane is far more than just Superman's girlfriend." This is from an article from 2016, which is actually written by the author of the series in question, Gwenda Bond. So we're gonna get to hear straight from the author's mouth what her series is about. This article would demonstrate that she was aware of certain aspects of Lois's history, and definitely cared about the character, but it was also filtered through a certain lens. The idea that she viewed a lot of Lois's lore as outdated or sexist, and something to be not just updated but fixed. I have quotes, glorious quotes, I'm excited. In Superman's Girlfriend Lois Lane, she was frequently taught lessons by Superman, truth, who she mercilessly pursued in the hope of getting him to put a ring on it. Other stories have pitted her against women defined as romantic rivals, like Lana Lang or Cat Grant. That was a very concise and narrow view of Lois's history, and also her relationship to some of the other female characters. Not Lana though, that's pretty accurate for Lana. You won't see Lois pitted against Cat Grant in any issue of Superman's Girlfriend Lois Lane, because she couldn't have been, because the character of Cat was created in 1987, over a decade after Superman's Girlfriend Lois Lane stopped running, and 5 years after the Superman family, where the comic was transferred to after its cancellation stopped running. Lois has had rivalries with other characters. Cat was initially introduced in the reboot era following Crisis on Infinite Earths in 1985 as a love interest for Clark. John Byrne described her rather flippantly as a replacement Lana Lang. However, her triangle was already of the more updated variety for the time, even if it was already a bit of a played out concept. Lois and Clark were pretty endgame, and the Archie love triangle style trope was no longer quite as in vogue, and Cat was fairly quickly phased into another role. Or is the complaint here that Lois would ever have a rivalry with any female character over Superman or Clark? A love triangle or romantic rivalry isn't inherently bad, it's more in how it's executed and the fact that it can be overdone and it can become lazy or trope that's just fallen back upon. But it can also be interesting if one takes the time to breathe some new life into it. That being said, no Superman's Girlfriend Lois Lane, which ran from 1958 to 1974, does not pass muster when it comes to many of the gender and sexual mores of 2016. When that occurs and one is examining a character with such a long history, who has gone through so many societal trends. One can take them in their context and in their time and examine it from a variety of ways. Be annoyed, indifferent, amused. Think of different ways that the character could be updated while still honoring some of the fun aspects of that history. Since Bond was approached by DC to update the character for a modern audience, it was a chance to create a Lois for the 2010s. Bond stated, "My own new young adult novel series featuring the character finally gives Lois top billing. In an era when we routinely see young female actresses ambushed with the question of whether they are feminists or not, Lois Lane is more relevant than ever. I think her answer would be yes, aren't you? She's a character who speaks to all of us, just plain human girls and women. A character who tells us we can do or be anything, that we can have it all, no matter how the world tries to get in our way." Having it all when taken to its extreme can actually be quite a dangerous mindset. There is only so much time in the day, so many skills one can acquire, so much emotional energy one can expend. And there are always problems, even if on the surface it may not appear that there are. Balance when striving for goals is an oft undiscussed virtue. If one attempts to have it all, they can burn out quickly or end up being quite harsh on themselves, castigating themselves before an unattainable altar. If having it all is simply having happiness and achieving the things that one wants, then that's a different story. However, that is not what Lois in this tale is talking about. Lois is chasing it all, Sex and the City style. Friends, job, fashion, boys, clout, or well, boy, because Clark is in this. He's her online boyfriend, Smallville guy. They claim they're not boyfriend and girlfriend yet, but the amount they talk and how they talk to each other, they're pretty much already in that territory. Having them meet online is one of the more positive updates of this story. On getting the project, Bond described it as follows to Muggle.net in 2014. "I was very lucky to be approached about whether I had any interest in writing a YA version of Lois Lane. My answer was obviously an enthusiastic yes. After a little back and forth to make sure I'd have freedom to make the project my own, I got to work." Bond went on to state that she wanted to do a Lois origin story, as we usually encounter Lois as an adult, so there was room to play in that space. Hence, Lois Lane Fallout is meant to be a beginning. This is Lois's super reporter origin. She's on her way to becoming the Lois that we're more familiar with. The interview then devolves to talking about her Hogwarts house because it's Muggle.net. Lois Lane Fallout was published in 2015 through Switch Press. So that's where the book is coming from. In approaching it, I'm going to talk about it overall and less of a beat by beat thing, because the story can actually be summarized quite succinctly, which I will do now. This story is about Lois Lane starting at a new high school, East Metropolis, at age 16. The daughter of Army General Sam Lane, she has moved around a lot and is described as an army brat. This location is promised to be the final location, no more moves. Now Lois has a past as a troublemaker, and so she's hoping to make a fresh start. A slouchy boy in a baggy t-shirt held the door for me. That must mean my carefully selected ensemble of plaid mini, black tights, and sweater with a small cute skull and crossbones motif was okay. I'd been to enough new schools to know that people didn't hold doors if they thought you were dressed too weirdly. That's page 5, but it's actually the first page of the story. Lois has a very "this is the way things are, no questions asked" attitude. So if one has the kind of mentality where they do question things such as, "Oh, what kind of schools are those? Those don't match with the kind of schools that I've transferred to," then it's alright. The entire book is going to have you questioning Lois. Because Lois is so firm in her convictions that at times it can become aggravating, particularly if there are logical questions to be asked as to what is happening. On the flip side, one may connect with her instantly, and then that will just build throughout the novel. On her first day, Lois spots a girl trying to tell the principal that she is being bullied, and she leaps into action and immediately decides, after looking at the two people and coming to all kinds of conclusions about them just based on their physical appearances, that she knows exactly what's going on and she is going to step in because she's Lois Lane. So she gives the principal all kinds of heck in front of the guest speaker for the day, who happens to be Perry White. Perry is impressed with all this teenage sass and offers her a job at the Daily Planet in the teen division that he's experimenting with for his new outing called the Daily Scoop. Lois vows to help this bullied girl who's named Anavi. She is being harassed by a group called the Warheads, who all dress alike and move in sync and are very obviously creepy and very obviously bullies. They all play the same video game, the unfortunately titled World's War III. With the help of her online friend and guy in a chair Smallville guy, Lois is gonna investigate. She's gonna solve the mystery of what's going on in this online game and these bullies and how it all connects to the school overall. Is there some kind of underlying plot? Of course there is. And through it all, she's gonna try and make some friends. So that's the overall synopsis. Now let's start breaking it down. Let's start off with how Lois gets her job at the Daily Scoop. We are thrown right into the conflict in this novel, just right off the bat, after learning what she's wearing, of course. Perry White gives Lois her job on page 12. This is after Lois goes to the office to register, but nobody's there, and so she goes to eavesdrop when she hears an argument, which is Anavi talking about how she's being bullied. But Anavi doesn't speak like how anybody actually speaks. One of Anavi's character traits is that she won the spelling bee, and they treat it like a character trait. This is not just a fact. This is a core part of Anavi. She won the spelling bee. They highlight it multiple times. And because of this, she does not speak with any kind of natural language flow. It's not she has a verbose vocabulary or knows a lot of words that aren't commonly employed in the usual parlance. No, it's that she just uses words even outside of the context that would make sense to use them just because they're big. They wouldn't permit me to complete my computer science homework this morning. I kept transcribing incorrect answers. I swear to you, they're doing something to me, to my mind. Psychological coercion. Those are the closest terms I can find, though they are not precisely correct. Anavi talks like someone who has the Thesaurus app open on their phone. This is so that rather than having a defined personality trait that will change over time, when her speech pattern changes when she's assimilated by the warheads, that is the cue, because she no longer talks like that. It's something obvious and unsubtle, and it's there to make up for the fact that Lois Lane is not going to have time to get to know her. She is going to meet Anavi on this page and then instantly just start defending her and actually not really have many full conversations with her. Anavi is more of a prop for Lois in this story. Anavi is Lois's cause more than she is Lois's friend. Part of that is because of how poorly defined and handled the bullying situation itself is, which we will get to. As mentioned, Lois jumped to Anavi's defense because Anavi looked upset and she didn't like the principal's suit or his attitude. So this is how she gets that card from Perry. He loves disrespect. Now, Lois does happen to be right about everything that's going on, but this is the kind of work where Lois is right about everything and everyone. And even if she isn't, the narrative still takes her side. Lois had met Anavi's bullies already within the first few pages, and they are complete stereotypes. And it's also very obvious from the start that there's something more going on with them. So the opportunity for a more nuanced or subtle look at bullying is completely lost. Now, Lois, up until this point in the story, which is page 12, had never considered journalism as a career at all. So this just kind of falls into her lap. So this book becomes less of a journey of Lois learning that journalism is a way to express herself, finding her passion and her calling, and more like it's happening because this is her character's destiny. Lois works at the Daily Planet, so let's have her work at the Daily Scoop. Lois did have a history of being a troublemaker, but it's revealed that it's not because she's always investigating and has a nose for truth, but rather that she's inserting herself into situations like she has with Anavi, and we're just supposed to assume that she's always in the right, because she's Lois Lane. Here she is talking to the office admin while she's being enrolled. Did you really dox an art teacher who is living under an assumed identity? No, I sent the cops some publicly available documents. Okay, I need some more context. Doxing is serious. Was this person a pedophile, which seems to be what is being implied or danced around? There is no context given, so we're supposed to assume that this is a righteous doxing of justice. Again, this novel wants you to only come at things from Lois's perspective, which can get bumpy when Lois can be awful to characters for no reason, just based on her own assumptions. With one character in particular, this is quite egregious because he literally does nothing. But she's also not the kindest to characters like Smallville Guy. Clark and Lois are already really close online friends when this novel begins. They talk every day, they tell each other everything, they talk about missing each other. She met Clark on a forum called Strange Skies. She joined this after there was a mysterious incident in Kansas that she had with her father. They were out and they saw this battle, and then there were rocks coming towards them, and she was saved by a mysterious flying figure. So she wrote about her experience on this message board under the name of Skeptic Girl 1. The part of her having this encounter with a teen Superman before he was Superman and it causing her to seek out these hidden truths is a fun one, even though it very much takes her into Chloe Sullivan territory. What is never explained is why Clark messages her. He reaches out to her after reading her story and the two become friends. But why? Especially because he's very cagey and won't reveal his Clark Kent identity and says that he can't because it's too dangerous and acts very sus. But why? Why can she not know that he's Clark Kent? What's he done that's so out there as Clark that she's gonna be able to put two and two together? Lois does not like that this is a secret, so she ends every convo by trying to pry his real identity out of him. Every single one. even though he's told her that he can't. They've been friends for 2 years. The book makes a point about this because there is one time when she doesn't ask him and she has this line about how this is the first time I haven't asked him who he was. I had to shut the laptop then. It was the first time I'd ever closed one of our regular nightly chats without asking who he was, in one way or another. I wondered if that was what he wanted to remind me of, unable to believe I would disappear again without it. That must be very exhausting for Clark. If it's bothering her that much, then just don't talk to him. FaceTime me, bro. The thing is that Clark bends over backwards for her in this story. He names the calf on the farm Nellie Bly because she tells him to. He runs out and buys a VR headset with all of his savings when he learns that she's about to try and go into the game to investigate. He comes into the game to protect her, of course playing an alien character who can shoot eye beams. Cute. Just like how her school colors are blue and red. By the way, in this VR game, World War III, you feel actual pain when you get hit. Serious pain, like getting shot level pain. This game does not sound like it would be on the market for kids. It also causes severe disorientation if the headsets are abruptly removed. How many people would just rip the headsets off to see if that was true, especially around this age range? These hollow sets, that's what they're called, they're a lawsuit waiting to happen. Anyway, Lois regularly closes chats on Clark or just signs off in a huff when she's annoyed with him. So he walks on eggshells, worried about angering her, sometimes not even messaging her unless she messages first, lest she be angry. When he doesn't want to help her break into the secret research facility, the ARL labs later on, she takes this as an indication that their entire friendship was fake. Real friends help you break into secret labs, regardless of any danger to their secret identities that they've hidden from you. Speaking of friendship, Lois wanted to make friends. That's one of the reasons she's excited to be working at the Daily Scoop. In a solid bit of characterization, it's established that Lois is so reckless in part because they move so much that there were never any lasting consequences that she had to face long term. So she's trying not to do that at East Metropolis and failing. One potential friend who also works for the Scoop is Maddie, because she told her to look up Nellie Bly. Lois is oddly obsessed with Maddie. What she's wearing, how much makeup she is or isn't wearing, and also her relationship, or lack thereof, with fellow Scoop co-worker James, who she hates with an irrational passion because he has nice hair and teeth and his family is rich. That's really the crux of it. He had a glossy crown of brown hair and blinding white teeth, like he'd been bred to them. She hates him on principle and proceeds to do things like, for the majority of the novel, not even call him by his name, just calling him the Third because he's James the Third. At points when James is not even around, the story will stop for her to make fun of him. It got to the point where some of these, you can't see them, but they're marked with the letter J, just for moments where we're just insulting James. This happens when her father arrives to punish her for all the Daily Scoop shenanigans. Aha! Bingo! Eureka! What he was doing became as clear as the crystal James's family no doubt used at the dinner table. If this were a sleazy romance novel, I'd worry that she'd end up with James. It has that level of obsessive energy. Or he would end up being Lex Luthor in a toupee and he just rips it off at the end. It was me, Lex, who you'd never met. Ooh, and then if this was channeling the Silver Age, she still would have dated him. If this was a later YA book, she would have been interested in Maddie, and that's why she would have been so obsessed and worried about the relationship with James. Because she liked Maddie, and Maddie liked James, but James likes Maddie's his twin. She's so obsessed with this relationship that actually comes up in the novel's denouement, the epilogue. Maddie's gaze found its way to James, like it always did. I didn't tell Maddie that he wasn't worthy of her. Why are you so obsessed with them? Lois treats Maddie marginally better than she treats James, in that she doesn't constantly belittle her. No, Lois is always a bit too busy for Maddie. She also ends up being quite manipulative in how she thinks about how she needs to handle Maddie to get on her good side. She ends up weaponizing the fact that James likes Maddie's twin and that Maddie is insecure about that. Maddie and her sister were majorly identical twins, so much so that James was an idiot or blind if he couldn't see the resemblance. Her sister was like a makeup ad, all soft luminous smiles and no edge. She was probably perfectly nice, but given Maddie's crimson streaked hair and band fascinations, she was undoubtedly used to being lost in her glowing sister's shadow. A lot of hurtful assumptions going on here, Lois. No way was I going along with that. James was right. You and your sister don't seem at all alike, I said. Before she could get hurt, I added, you're the interesting one. I can see that from a mile away. Maddie soaked up the compliment like she had the crumbs of James's notice in the office. People should pay more attention to her. She was interesting. Maddie does seem to be the interesting one, or maybe not, because we haven't talked to Maddie's twin. We'll save that for the sequel. The sequel has a whole Maddie's twin plot where she collapses in the wrong part of Metropolis. But in this book, there's this subplot that seemingly goes nowhere, and it's one that left me extremely concerned for Maddie. Maddie wears all of these cool band tees for these obscure bands that Lois has never heard of, and at one point Lois asks Maddie for a playlist. Then she gets it and sees that none of these bands are on it, so she asks Maddie, what's the deal? Am I not cool enough for the cool bands? And then later on in the novel, Maddie confesses to her that the band shirts she wears, they're fake, they're not real bands. She makes these band shirts because they're fictional bands that she wishes she was a part of. How legit are these shirts? And also, is Maddie okay? But Lois doesn't have time for that because this confession happens right as they're about to start the climax. And then rather than getting back to it later, they instead indirectly talk about James. The one person Lois is consistently nice to is Devin. He's cool, who also really likes World War III, but he's trying to pretend he isn't a nerd because he wants to be a cool hipster kid. He seems like a chill dude. Lois likes him and admires his fro. He likes her and asks her out, but it doesn't go anywhere because of Smallville guy. Lois also briefly talks about wanting to befriend Anavi, but that doesn't really end up happening. That's all focused about her being bullied and Lois protecting her. So that means it's time to get to the bullies, the warheads. They're a group of bully gamers who, it's super obvious from the first encounter, are telepathically linked. You know instantly that they are some form of hive mind and that that's how they're influencing Anavi. In the real world, they sit beside her in class and whisper menacingly. It is bullying, but it muddies the waters narratively when Lois does briefly try to make the cyberbullying point, since this real-world bullying is more what the book focuses on than the cyber. Which is a shame, because a lot of really cool and relevant plots are missed because it's so obvious from the start. The conflict between the principal and Anavi could have been taken up a notch if the bullying happening to her was happening outside of school in the game, because then technically it would be outside of his purview. And even though it would have been affecting her performance and making her uncomfortable in school and affecting her grades and all of the things that are happening, there would have been a question as to how much can he and should he do. It would have raised a more nuanced question as to how far does responsibility extend, and then it could have been brought back to that more in-school level. Instead, this just becomes a heavy-handed PSA about how bullying is wrong and teachers don't handle it correctly. There's also the missed opportunity to explore the concept that some adults don't understand or grasp cyberbullying or how it can impact people. On the whole, the game where the bullying is taking place itself is very confused. World War III is either the best game ever made or the most incomprehensible, incoherent mess. World War III is an open world style MMO, an MMORPG actually, where you can be a fantasy style character, an alien, or a full-on human merc decked out with military weaponry. You can play solo or as a team. You amass runes and the like and level up, but also you have different forms of stats at the bottom as well. You can spend years building up your territory like Devin has, but as for what the end goal of the game is, there doesn't seem to be one. Is it kind of endless like Minecraft and there are things you can pursue but you don't have to? You could just farm all day if you wanted to or mine? Or is it like Elden Ring and you need to go around and amass things so that you can defeat bosses? They act like killing in the game is super awful, but the game is called World War III. What else would you do in it? Is this a PvP? Just name the type of game it is, book please. Or some lore to explain in the universe, please. I need lore. Now, for some, how open-ended the game's depiction is may work, because then they can fill it in with any of the rules or details they so choose. But for those who are more into games, details like the rules could have fleshed out the world and also made it clearer how the warheads were operating and what made them stand out from other players. And also which parts of their behavior was bullying and which parts were gameplay, which again could even have been a whole added layer of people trying to defend them by saying, oh, that's just how you game, bro. As a reader, you're never given till the end why they're targeting Anavi specifically, but you know there is a reason because they need to expand their hive mind in some way. But you're just kind of left wondering because it's not fully clear what their goal is. The goal of what the company controlling them is will become clear, but their own independent goal doesn't. They seem to be targeting Anavi because she won the spelling bee. As mentioned, they walk in sync, they make the same gestures, they finish each other's sentences. It's never explained why being linked that way gives them the ability to then press themselves into other people's minds, because they seem to be able to do it and also to be able to do it to people who haven't played the game. Because because initially it appeared as though if you played the game, it opened up some certain neural pathways that they could then enter, but they will later influence people who have not played the game. Ultimately, because of this, it just comes across like they're recruiting people so they can get good scrub. So you miss out on some opportunities for exploring some of the trolling or the douchery that can happen in games like World of Warcraft. Leroy Jenkins! This can make this element hard to connect to the plot if you are aware of these circles, which can cause a bit of a problem because this is a huge part of what the whole story revolves around. It's also 2015, so Lois gets mad about her character's game design because her character is barefoot and has cleavage, which I don't know. Again, I don't know enough about the game world because Anavi's character is described as having full body armor. So did it just depend what class you chose? Because this is one of those moments that's just meant to be read as inherently sexist, but again, there are other elements at play. Is there a character creator beyond default settings? Side note, some people, including females, enjoy customizing their characters in a variety of ways, including with bosoms and cleavage. This can be a form of escapism for some, or just entertainment. This is one of those, if you align with Lois's viewpoint, it will be alright. But if you again question it anyway, immersion shattered and potential annoyance activated. Devin's the one who made Lois's character, an elf named Lo. Oh, also Lois steals James's holo set for this investigation, cause screw James. Devin also helps with this, probably because he hopes it will help Lois date him, but he says it's cause screw James. But also later in the same page will say to be nicer to James. Devin slid his chair closer to mine, hooking James's holo set over his ear. Don't worry about it. It's good for him to run up against someone who isn't falling all over him. So nobody in this book then. Cool. And later in the book, when he finds out that it's his headset and he asks for it back, she just implies that he's sexist and wouldn't want to play as a female elf, so it's fine that she stole it. Take that, James. Devin said you've never even used it since he set it up. Is that true? James nodded, annoyed again. I said, and you'd be playing as an elvish princess named Lo. Go on, use it. Thanks. I was tentative. Thanking James felt weird, but he didn't even exert himself to toss back a "you're welcome," so I wouldn't be doing it again anytime soon. Lois decides that her first big story at the Daily Scoop is gonna be this bullying story. So she sets about investigating the warheads and why it seems like they get special treatment, like they get to cut class in the afternoon, they get to play this game during lunch. So she stalks them. She transfers into a computer science class that she's not qualified for, and she has no prereqs for, but it's fine because she has an in with the admin assistant because she told her to spit inside the principal's coffee. I paused in the front office and said to Rhonda, I hope you spit in his coffee. From the way Rhonda looked at me, shocked before she gave a pink smile, I figured Principal Butler was lucky if that was all that his assistant did to his morning cuppa these days. Good for you. I left inspired by her example. I'd already cut one class. Why not another later this afternoon? Note how Lois just used her own assumption about the other person's actions and behavior to justify her own. She does that a lot in this novel. Now, it must be noted that there is a fantasy element at play here with Lois, and if one connects with her, this may land, and Lois could become an avatar for those feelings of frustration, those things not said that one wishes they had, or an outlet for those moments of seeing things that were unfair or feeling that they couldn't speak up against adults or just in general. And her base bar of bullying is bad, I don't like bullies, is one that many people can get behind. It's like with anything, it depends how much the other elements do or don't take you out of the overall narrative. Lois finds out about a project called Hydra and gets some illegal quotes from the principal by recording him without his consent. She learns that the warheads are part of some kind of secret experiment at an ARL research facility, and that they were signed up for it. Smallville guy tracks down the specifics because Clark is a hacker now, but so is Devin because he can hack the school's firewall because the school commissions students to build it. Through all of this, Lois learns that the holoset's creator had a theory that if one utilized them a certain way, gamers' consciousness could be linked, utilizing auditory cues for a hive mind gaming experience, and then they could be unlinked with another auditory cue. Sounds fine, put it out, released to the public. So at this point, it may be clear where this is going, especially when you learn that the company was bought out by another company with military interests. Hold it inside, we're gonna get there. First, back to the Daily Scoop, where Lois publishes this article. She also publishes Anavi's name because Anavi asked her to, which is another missed opportunity because initially Anavi had asked her not to. It would have been a really strong moment if Lois, in her excitement and feeling it would make a better story, had published her name anyway. Because part of what's talked about with Lois in this novel is that she goes too far and forges ahead, leaving other people behind her. So publishing Anavi's name without her consent would would have been a powerful lesson. And it would have also went with the plot better when a Navi wants a retraction claiming she was never bullied. It would have added another layer of questioning the proceedings of what exactly is going on, rather than just being really obvious that a Navi has been assimilated. The Borg heads are efficient like that. Played more subtly, even the hive mind concept itself could have been really cool. The concept that some kids would try it out to game better, but then find comfort in the shared mind, and it could work well as a commentary on seeking acceptance, especially because it's a story focused on high school. Even having a Navi who is a bit of an outsider drawn to it, and this kind of group rather than the more tenuous friendship with Lois, would have been an interesting idea to explore. As it stands, once they've assimilated the spelling bee champion, their strategy gets better. Surejan. Sure, Jan. Despite Perry being the editor of a major metropolitan newspaper, he links their scoop story incriminating the well-connected principal to the Daily Planet homepage, only calling Lois in to ask about whether she vetted her sources or not after they get complaints. And to compound that, after a Navi, who's the main focus of the piece, demands a retraction, Perry just leaves it up and says that she has 3 days to get it sorted, and then gives her a 4th day later on. Later, we also learn that the kids have access to the main page so that they can live stream to it. A group of 16-year-olds with the ability to live stream to the main Daily Planet homepage. What could go wrong? There are so many questions surrounding how the warheads can manipulate people and whether they're manipulating some of the people that Lois is also investigating. Maybe Lois shouldn't have told Rhonda to spit in the principal's coffee. Nah, he's awful because he's rich. I added a grace note about racquetball because it seemed like the kind of non-sport Principal Butler would think rich people were into. Take that, racquetball. Some of the sweetest parts of this book are arguably also the least necessary, and those are the moments between Smallville Guy and Lois. Now, when doing a book for DC, there is a lot of back and forth with the editorial, and for a Lois book, it's unclear how much Superman they would or would not want, despite this supposedly being an outing where she's supposed to stand on her own. So this book will just stop for him, and they will have lengthy conversations, and he'll send her cute photos of his cow. The thing is that you have a connection. You even get the sense of why they would like each other in the future. They both have this innate need to help people. For as clumsily illustrated as it is, that's what's going on with Lois. She wants to right injustices and seek the truth, which is why it's sad the story didn't have her coming to the realization that for her, journalism was the way to do it, rather than Perry just showing up and being like, she's so spunky, have this card. So for her and Clark, I'm just gonna call him Clark for now, you see that they have complementary heroic streaks, but they're both going about achieving things in their own way. Skeptic Girl 1. You and me? I mean, we're the same. Oh God, we're the same, you and I. Smallville Guy. How? Skeptic Girl 1. We protect people, see what other people miss. We don't need anyone to look after us. But yeah, this book could have used a lot less Clark. It would have been nice to see a world where the other elements that are being built around Lois specifically were more fleshed out, such as the grand reveal of the experiment, it's Ender's Game. These kids are somehow going to be used to control soldiers, so they can go into battle and execute strikes, or soldiers will be linked and trained in the game. It's a really confusing mishmash. There'd be no worries about soldiers not following orders to the letter if their minds and bodies are being controlled, driven, the man had said from afar. The point is, it's bad and nefarious. Also, Lois never cares about the warheads themselves, even though about a little over halfway through the book, she learns that they also weren't involved in this voluntarily. They just thought that they were gonna go test out some cool VR headsets, and now they're the Borg. But Lois doesn't care because they're not her friends. Screw them, and James. Lois can vacillate in this from being assertive and feisty, as many have called her in reviews, to mean, in that often fall into trap of mistaking strength for cruelty or unkindness. This sadly can often happen in books where they endeavor to have feminist critiques, and they end up being not very nuanced explorations of the topic, and end up falling into cliched girl power moments. This also occurs in this book, which is unfortunate as it was such a pressing element for the author as she brought it up herself. It can be very paint by numbers. Password? The reply came. Rosie, I said too loud with triumph. The Riveter, Maddie said in a softer tone. You'll stash the pen wherever is handiest. You're gonna pull this off with no problem. We are. Girl power, right? Girl power, Maddie agreed. Though it sounds really dorky when you say it like that. Spying is girl power, because Lois stole her father's equipment and he just has some super high level infrared bugs cuz. The tech in this is a bit futuristic, but that's one of the more fun elements. The idea of being so immersed in a game world can be an appealing one. Here's one of those examples of veering into negative assumptions about people who perform traditional femininity. The color pink is roundly trashed. Pink, get it out. Such as in an exchange when Lois's sister Lucy gets a pink holo set with the game Unicorn University. It was hot pink. When she unwrapped the present at Christmas last year, she'd seen the color and then her trademark nose wrinkle. She'd wanted World War III. My parents had been steered to Unicorn University as a more appropriate game for a young girl. After some justified ranting and raving, she calmed down enough to try it out. The thing is, by this point in the story, we've learned that there aren't that many games out there for these VR headsets, and also that World War III is violent, and that this is a game where you can actually be hurt. So it is conceivable that Lucy's parents got this for her not because it's pink, but because they feel it's more appropriate for a girl her age. Maybe that's the only color. Sometimes with these early releases, they don't have that many colors. So both explanations are plausible, but only Lois's is entertained, and also taken as the correct one. I'm also slightly concerned that Lucy might be a cyberbully. Lucy, I said, are you a killer unicorn? You promised you wouldn't tell. In the game, she made a punk rock custom unicorn called Death Metal, and then she formed a group with other unicorns, and she says they just go around and deal with some of the other unicorns. Is she bullying people who actually want to play Unicorn University? I'm worried about Lucy. I read Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen. So Lois saves the day. Clark is able to get a researcher on their side. So she forgives him for not being there physically, because how dare he. They save Anavi and Devon, who is also assimilated, and then they are able to sever the link forever. So I guess they're just not telepathic anymore. They live stream their takedown of the facility, which is fine, don't worry about it. Then they go back and write up the story and publish it. Heroes all, and James gets to be Lois's friend, the honor. There was a moment when they published the first article by Lois, which is really well written, clever and biting and witty like Lois. It made me wish that there were more article segments throughout this book. After they published that first one, they say they left a sidebar where people could publish their own bullying stories, which they do. And all I could think was that James should write in and write one about Lois. As the book ends, Smallville Guy and Lois share a moment inside the game, where he says he wishes he could tell her his secret, maybe one day. And then they go help Devon rebuild his domain, which was destroyed by the warheads earlier. And we walked into the violently beautiful sunset together. Oh, you know I bought the second and the third one. I'm in it now. This work is flawed. There are some pretty large gaps in logic that you have to continually overlook to make the plot work. Anything from how the world works in the game, to newspapers, to switching classes. Lois's perspective is quite biased and at times mean-spirited. But there are moments where she really does feel like a teenage Lois Lane. And if you headcanon the meanness of Silver Age Lois, she's perfectly in character. There are moments where it really worked, and you felt that she had this sense that injustices were happening and that she had the need to right them. The story does well setting up Lois's and Clark's dynamic in this universe. It also sets up a solid relationship with her family and does lay the groundwork for the conflict with her father, while not casting him as an unsympathetic monster. She also has a nice relationship with her sister, Lucy. It's not the focus, but it's a nice accent. The new characters, minus Anavi, who is less a character and more a plot motivation, are likable enough and have their own distinct traits. The fact that this is a series means that hopefully some of the threads that were laid in this will be picked up later, and some of those things that may have seemed superfluous may end up mattering. As mentioned, much of this will depend on how much one connects with and enjoys Lois's characterization. Again, the concept of Lois discovering her passion and love for journalism is a fun one, and there are some nice canonical nods, like how she can't spell at all. This doesn't really factor into her relationship with Anavi. That would have been a cute dynamic, that she can't spell and Anavi can. But as a superhero style origin, but for Lois, this is clunky and cliche ridden. I didn't even tell you how she got to the research lab. She does it by breaking into the principal's office with a fake apology note, and then she gets into his email because he's written his password down, and then she CCs herself and writes an email inviting herself to the research facility, shows up and pulls an, oh no, I left my notebook, and then just grabs the key and goes to the right floor. Again, it's silly, but it's in keeping with Lois being reckless, so you have both things happening at the same time. This book wants to celebrate seeking the truth and standing up for others, so its heart is definitely in the right place. This book seemed to do well and garnered 2 sequels. 3 says that Lois takes on her greatest challenge, love. You know I can't wait for that. Overall, it was a pretty easy read. Miles will vary whether you found this fun or frustrating. As mentioned, I've seen that many people love this work, so if you did, tell me why. I want to feel the love. If this sounds like it's up your alley, this book is still out there and it's reasonably priced. For this is just my opinion and I want to hear yours. What did you think of this book? Did you think it was a fun representation of teenage Lois? A fun mystery? Would you play World War III? Tell me things down below. While you're down there, please do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking this fun day spent discussing, I guess, novels with me, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.